Hello, I'm Paul, and this is Paul Plays with Fire. Welcome. Come on in and grab yourself a chair. Well, you picked the right day to be here, because today on the show, we're making buttermilk pancakes right here on the Blackstone Griddle. But first, let's talk about the ingredients. We're going to be making these pancakes from scratch, using basic pantry items. No mixes here. We'll start with the dry ingredients. We'll start with 1 cup of flour. Most recipes call for all-purpose flour. I've been using King Arthur bread flour because that's what I had on hand and because I was really happy with the results. I've since read that the higher protein content in bread flour can result in a fluffier pancake because of bubble retention. It keeps the bubbles inside. I guess all those glutens keep the bubbles in. Since we're optimizing for fluffy, that makes sense. But all-purpose flour would work just fine here. And 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Make sure your baking powder is fresh, and by fresher I mean 3 months or less since opening. Fresh baking powder means fluffier pancakes, and because the baking powder acts as a leavening agent, just like in quick breads and biscuits. And most baking powders these days is double acting. The first release of carbon dioxide happens when the baking powder gets wet, and the second release of carbon dioxide happens when the batter is heated. That is when that rise comes after you flip the pancake over. And we're going to use 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Again, fresh here is what you want. That means 6 months or less since you opened it. Baking soda also helps with browning the pancakes and reacts with the buttermilk, adding even more carbon dioxide bubbles to the pancakes. That results in fluffier pancakes. You see a pattern here? And finally, 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of sugar. Next, the wet ingredients. We've got 1 cup of buttermilk. Buttermilk started out as a byproduct of making butter. Buttermilk was leftover liquid after churning cultured cream into butter. And because the cream and butter making process was cultured, buttermilk has a lactic acid tang to it. These days, buttermilk is made by adding a lactic bacteria to homogenize and pasteurize milk, but the results are the same. And as we said earlier, the lactic acid in the buttermilk reacts with the baking soda, making the carbon dioxide bubbles in the batter. And the buttermilk's creaminess also helps retain those bubbles in the batter. And 1 egg. The original recipe I started out using was from Kenji Lopez Alt. He too was looking for maximum fluffiness. In that recipe, he separated his egg yolks from his whites, and then he whipped the whites into a soft peak. I tried that once. I decided it was just too much for pancake, so now we just crack an egg in with the other wet ingredients. And I also use about 1/4 cup of half and half. This helps thin out the buttermilk a little bit. I know, using half and half to thin something out, right? I found that straight buttermilk was just a little too thick for me, and the pancakes wouldn't flow on the griddle. You could also use a little milk here. And next up, we've got 1 tablespoon of melted butter. The melted butter helps it incorporate better, and then you just kind of drizzle that in. And finally, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, real vanilla extract, not the imitation. I brought this home from Mexico. It is delicious and it adds a little something extra to the pancakes. I'm gonna have to go buy some next time I go. Mardi Gras, which is French for Fat Tuesday, is the last official day of festivals and parties before Lent. This is also known in some cultures as Shrove Tuesday or Pancake Tuesday. Pancakes have been eaten on Shrove Tuesday since at least the 16th century. One of the traditions of Lent is to avoid fatty and rich foods. So what better way to use up your butter, eggs, and milk going into Lent than to make pancakes? And that is why Fat Tuesday is also called Pancake Tuesday. And now we're going to mix together our dry ingredients. We're going to keep our wet ingredients and our dry ingredients separate for now, because we don't want those carbon dioxide bubbles to start getting made before we're ready for them. So we're going to put a cup of flour in there, and then we've got our baking soda, baking powder, sugar, and salt in here. And we'll just mix that around in there. And then we'll take a fork and just lightly incorporate it together. We don't really need to do too much. Just make sure that the flour and all the other stuff gets mixed together. That's probably good. We'll set that aside. And now we're going to do our wet ingredients. For starters, we'll get our egg in there. Good timing, out of paper towels. It's not a very messy dish though. And then we've got our buttermilk and our half and half. a cup of buttermilk and a quarter cup of half and half, just to thin out the buttermilk a little bit. And I'm gonna put all this entire recipe will be down in the description, so don't fret over it. You don't have to write everything down. Put that in there. Melted butter. And we'll kind of stir that melted up butter up a little bit, and then we'll kind of drizzle it in and stir it in so we don't curdle anything while we're doing it. There we go. And then finally, a teaspoon of vanilla extract. A little extra because it's so good. Then we'll just stir that up a little bit. And see how the vanilla gives it a nice color. That and the egg yolk too. And then we'll just set those aside. Then we'll start the griddle, and we'll talk about the griddle in here just a little bit, about temperatures and stuff. So, and that is really important. That was one of the things I had the hardest time getting my arms around, was what temperature to use on the griddle. We'll see in a little bit. All right, we've got our griddle heated up, and for temperatures, we've got just under 400 on this left burner, and we've got just this left burner here, and we've got just over 400 on this middle burner here. So that's about where we want, just either side of 400 degrees. Matter of fact, I'm gonna turn that down just a little bit more, because it's plenty hot, and we're only making about 6 pancakes, so that's probably gonna be enough. That's a good point. This 1 cup, it's based on 1 cup of flour. That's why I call it a 1 cup recipe. This 1 cup recipe with everything I've got in the wet and dry ingredients will make just about 6 pancakes, so about, you know, that big around. And that's just enough for Mrs. Paul Plays with Fire and I. Throw on a little bit of bacon, a couple eggs, and that is a meal. Whew. Yeah, you're gonna need a nap after that. So, like I said, we've got our griddle at just under 400 and just over 400. So we're gonna throw out a test pancake. Well, first, go ahead and pour our wet ingredients right into our dry ingredients. And remember, once we do that, the active ingredients in the baking powder will start to make carbon dioxide. So we don't want to dilly-dally here. We want to get right to it. And that's also one of the things they talk about with pancakes, is don't beat them to death. Don't beat them to a smooth broth, a smooth batter, because what you're doing is you're beating all the bubbles out of them when you do that. So we want to do it just enough to incorporate the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients, and then stop. And if you have a couple pockets of dry powder, don't worry, they'll work their way out as we get through the process. There, that's just about like that. See that? No, it's not too, it's still pretty stiff, but everything seems to be mostly incorporated, and we haven't beaten it to death. So we're gonna go with that. And I use a 1/3 cup measure, a measuring cup, to make my pancakes. And I usually do 2 at a time, maybe 3 at a time if I'm feeling adventurous. But today, for starters, I always do just 1, just to gauge my temperature, because boy, you know, it's tricky. And we'll just let that sit for a little bit. This seems really stiff. I'm gonna go get a little bit of half and half. That first pancake, this is why you make a test pancake. That first pancake was just really stiff, so we added just a little more half and half to loosen it up a little bit. And there, now it's looking about like what I would expect. I want it to flow a little bit. This is gonna be more like a drop biscuit than pancake. Nothing wrong with that. Now, another thing they talk about with pancakes, how do you know when to turn them? Well, one, when it's done on the bottom side. But how do you tell to turn them without looking? When the bubbles start popping up. But the thing about, remember we've talked all this time about keeping our carbon dioxide inside of our pancake? Each one of those holes you see form is carbon dioxide bubble getting out. So you don't want to wait until, I hear some people say, wait until all the bubbles open up in the middle. We don't want to wait that long. We'll just take a peek. That's pretty good, actually. Now watch this. This is that second rise that I was talking about. And see, our griddle wasn't quite right, but it's pretty good. And our batter was really thick. That's right, it's a good starter pancake. And making, you know, with a fresh griddle and a fresh batch of pancake batter, it's always a good idea to make a first pancake and see how it goes. Then that can be the one at the bottom of the stack. Nobody will know. And it'll be delicious. Look at that rise we've gotten off of that. That is a nice looking pancake. And sure, we might have turned a little early, but think all the carbon dioxide that got trapped in there by doing it early. And then what we'll do, we'll turn it over on that side a little bit, and we'll do it a little bit more. So we'll go back and forth like that. That's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty tall too. There we go. Well, I think that's probably enough, finished up enough that we can go ahead and start another one. We'll see how these flow. Oh, see, that flows quite a bit better. There's just a little bit extra half and half in it. Another thing about making them too thick is that they can tend to be a little bit underdone in the middle if you're not careful. Okay, we're starting to see some bubbles now. Let's just take a peek. Pretty good. It can wait a little bit. There, look at that. Look at that second rise. That's pretty. Now we'll do two more real quick, just to show you how quick this goes. Six pancakes down just like that. And look at that second rise. Ooh, that's pretty. That is pretty. I've put the one done pancake up here out of the way just so it doesn't get overdone. I'll put it over here. How about that? Oh yeah. Those are looking very nice. Oh. There we go. Now we're talking. I think that one's done. Another couple minutes on that one. Ready to flip these. You know, it takes a whole batch of pancakes to get a griddle up to speed. Why do restaurants make so much better pancakes than you do at home? Because it takes a whole batch of pancakes to get your griddle up to speed. That's why. You're done and they're just getting warmed up for the day. Well, I only got 5 pancakes out of that, but that's going to be enough. Well, that looks good. Once again, I wish you had smell-o-vision. The smell coming off the griddle. Oh, the vanilla is just, oh, it smells so good. Okay, I'm gonna move these pancakes out of the way. Okay, now we gotta choose our victims. We'll put that one on the bottom. That looks pretty good. We'll put this one there. 3 pancakes. Those are stacked high, people. Stacked high. Here's one last tip for you. If you're gonna go all this work to make pancakes, use real maple syrup. It's so worth the difference. Whether you get it from the Northwoods of Wisconsin or the Northwoods of Maine or Vermont, it doesn't really matter as long as it's real maple syrup. So we're gonna put some maple syrup on top of these. And then we're just gonna put a little butter on top of them. Now, doesn't that look good? Well, if our goal was to get fluffy pancakes, I think we've achieved it. Because remember, this is only 3 pancakes. And it is a stack just as, it's got to be 4 or 5 inches tall. Well, whatever. Oh, and the butter won't even stay on top. Well, let's dig in. There's some cross section for you. That's some fluffy pancakes. I bet they taste as good as they look. Oh, yum. Well, those are good. Those are really good. And you know, this time of year, tailgating, football Saturdays, football Sundays, just any time, even during the week. And it makes everybody happy. Well, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. This has been Paul Plays with Fire. Thanks for watching. Mm-mm-mm.